Hello! Today's stories come from r/MaliciousCompliance. We've got 4 stories starting with Stop complaining about your neighbors. Okay, sure. Now, that story is very recent, and the told you so effect is never as sweet as this was. I have moved in an apartment with a roommate last summer. When we first came in, the biggest part of this sale was the fact that the apartment was freshly renovated and soundproofed. This one is important, and you'll see why. So when we got in, my roommate immediately fell in love with it, and I was too. When we moved in, we were very careful not to bother anyone as we wanted to quickly have a good relationship with our neighbors. Oh, did you see the new neighbors? They only move during the day. They don't make sound during the night. What nice people, kind of deal. And we can safely say it worked. What we did not know, however, is that we were only one of 3 renters when we first came in, us on the floor, another family upstairs on the opposite side, and another one on the 3rd floor, with one empty apartment between us. Turns out the soundproof statement was accurate, but only in regards to the inside to outside situation. When our upstairs neighbors moved in, it was a gosh darn nightmare. Sound from 5 a.m. to past midnight, 5 days in a row, dropping stuff, speaking loudly, yelling or walking in their apartment with shoes on. Out of frustration on the 5th day, I walked upstairs and met my neighbor at midnight. I asked them to cease their activities for the night. I have work in the morning and I cannot be kept up all night. I understood they were freshly moved in and they might have had a tight schedule, but midnight was too late to be moving stuff. He didn't reply and closed the door on me. I go downstairs and the sound starts over again. I notify my landlord and he tells me he'll handle it and apologized for the situation, explaining to me my neighbor had just moved and that he probably didn't understand what I was saying because of a language barrier. The neighbors were extremely loud. I know a lot of Karens will use that as an excuse to shower their neighbors with hate, but when I say loud, I mean it. There was no stop to their loud noises. It seemed like they couldn't be bothered to hold something without dropping it, or jumping up and down on the floor, or purposefully banging the bed frame against the wall when being intimate. I recorded the event and even installed microphones in my home jacked to my computer, activating and recording every time there is strong vibration in the house. Over 98 events on Monday, Friday, February 14th. I was livid. I sent that to the landlord and explained this cannot continue. First, the apartment was poorly soundproofed, which meant we were hearing every dang sound at all times. Second, we had notified the neighbors about the situation and they have ignored it. I have notified the landlord to make them aware of our situation. I reported the issues several times and even advised my landlord that there were very heavy sounding thuds coming from upstairs, which worried me. He answered with, "Stop complaining about your neighbors already. I have other things to do." I answered, "Understood, sir. Please be advised this will be my last communication and action to help you in that regard." You know, when I said I heard loud bangs? Turns out our upstairs neighbor was doing bench press lifting in his living room, and the heavy thuds I kept hearing was him dropping his weights on the ground. I had warned my roommate about removing anything she didn't want broken from the living room. Lo and behold, 4 days later, the first crack appeared. Then another. The floor was giving. I moved the couch out of the way and moved the TV and consoles into the bedroom. Fast forward to 3 days ago, after another series of loud bangs, I heard a loud crack followed by a "oh, frack," followed by very loud noises. I went to the living room to see my neighbor on the ground, with several actually gruesome injuries due to the fact he had just went through the floor and brought his bench and weight rack with him. I called an ambulance and the police. The police asked me if I reported the issue with my landlord, which I could confirm I had, due to my communications being made via email. I sent everything, and I am now, of course, filing to break my lease due to uninhabitable dwelling. The landlord came in yesterday and just proceeded to explode. Told me I should have made him aware that my neighbor was doing dangerous things, to which I answered I had notified him about the very loud sounds and he never investigated, and that he also ordered me to stop complaining about my neighbors. It was not my responsibility to go out of my way to protect his assets if he is unwilling to cooperate with me. My neighbor's roommate and I are now residing in a hotel until we can find a new place to live. We are now also looking towards adding a bit more salt to the injury by maybe filing for criminal negligence against both our landlord and the neighbor. The first because the apartment was apparently having some flaws, and the latter for endangering us. Had I not caught up on what was causing the sound earlier, me or, God forbid, my roommate could have been under that. Anyway, it was a fun week, and I do enjoy the accommodations of my hotel. Never went to a 4-star spa included hotel before. Turns out the chocolate on the pillow is a lie, and I am very disappointed about that. Edit. As I have advised to a few commentators, I followed up with my roommate, and she did not take the pictures of the event. She got a bit mad, I asked, considering what just happened, and questioned my priorities. I then explained that our Reddit story got a lot of attention, and some people in the comments requested some visual proof. I will spare you her answer. Update. My brother has agreed to take the case and look at the options. We are not feeling very vindictive, and our insurance are going to cover most of the costs, so we might file for negligence. I'm not a lawyer myself. I don't know the terms in English, but basically, the landlord should have had his building inspected before renting, which was apparently not done. Landlord has apparently calmed down after the events and has apologized for everything. He has scheduled a visit from an inspector to check the integrity of the apartment and the cause of the damage that would have allowed a human and exercise equipment to go through the floor and ceiling. In exchange for not pressing charges, he has agreed to reimburse all the money we have invested into the rent, our stay at the hotel, and a little extra as an apology, and the guarantee to either repair the apartment and soundproof it properly, or, if it is not an option to go back, he will relocate us onto another of his buildings, which are a lot better than what we had, reduce our rent quite significantly for as long as we stay, with papers to back his offer up, and a full year of free rent. This is actually quite generous in the current rent market. I'm leaving the final say to my roommate. On my end, I was not injured, she was not, and this could have just been a freak accident. Yes, the landlord is a bit of a jerk, but let's be honest, we all had worse, landlord wise. Plus, even if we take him up on his offers, the upstairs neighbor might be looking for some severe reparation. He did get injured after all. But we would be happy to hear about your opinion. What would you say? Take this further or just take the refund, plus the full year, rent free, and then low rent for the years to come? Last update. After a long time deciding what to do, we have opted to take the landlord's offer. However, we made it clear that we could not live under the same people if the soundproofing was not at the very least improved. We went to my brother's office and met with a colleague of his who multiple documents for us to sign. One of them for the promise of low rent. Landlord wanted to offer $250 off the market price. We negotiated it up to $300 to be applied on all our leases. We've also agreed to the reimbursement of 6 months of rent, which will cover us for the next year and then some, plus the free year. We received about $5,000 each, and the landlord has agreed to cover all the costs of the hotel we and our parent had to pay. We might be moving back into our apartment by the end of the month. It's a bit disappointing, as we kind of wanted to try another place, but from what I understand, there is a very good chance our neighbors are not moving back on their end, so it might just be back to the ideal scenario. There will be very heavy renovation done and a thorough inspection of the structure before we move back in. Huh, well, he did warn them. Hey, despite the stupid neighbors and a near catastrophic crushing accident, OP made out like a bandit on all that rent. Seems like a fantastic trade to me. There were some funny comments and a funny anecdote as well. Let's check it out. Blue Baby Cat said, "The weather girls were right. It's raining men." Weatherseed replied, "Drowning Pool was right. Bodies really do hit the floor." Necessary Echo said, "Miley Cyrus was right. He came in like a wrecking ball." Yeah, I guess said, "Whoa, just whoa. I've only ever imagined that kind of thing happening. Some kind of lawsuit is probably possible for unsafe conditions. Something was definitely wrong for the floor to give out like that." OP replied, "I only can assume so. I mean, I've been in very old buildings before and this did not happen. Then again, the weight was not spread over a big surface, and when you have over 250 pounds, if not more, concentrated on a single surface, plus whatever my neighbor's weight is, plus his weight rack." Orion's son said, "I had a similar problem with a landlord not listening many years ago. I lived in the second floor apartment. New tenants moved in directly below. The apartments had oversized living rooms. By the third day, I was over the noise they created. I called the landlord several times about the noise. I told him I believed they were revving a motorcycle in the unit. He basically told me I was crazy and to stop bothering him. So I did. Come the second month, the new tenants didn't pay their rent. By the third month, with no rent being paid, the landlord started the eviction process. A couple of weeks later, the tenants skipped out in the middle of the night. To this day, I don't believe I have ever had the same level of satisfaction as I did listening to the landlord having a complete breakdown when they finally got into the apartment and saw that they had been riding motorcycles in a circular track in the living room. They completely destroyed the carpet, floor, and subfloor. They ruined the kitchen linoleum with grease, oil, and other fluids. Gee, if only he had listened to me on day 3. Next up, at will. Employment cuts both ways, sister. A few years ago, my husband was laid off at the start of summer. I had a part time gig as a teacher, but it didn't come with benefits. I had to take a job, any job, to provide health insurance. While hubby looked for a new gig, I got a job as a teller at a bank. I tried, but was new to keeping a till, so a few times a week my register wouldn't balance. Never very much money, under a few dollars, but the whole staff had to stay late until we straightened it out. I felt horrible for the rest of the staff. As if that shame wasn't bad enough, my supervisor, Mel, would remind me that I worked at will and they could fire me at any time. Our family's health insurance going up in smoke was terrifying to me. Sometimes it was hard to hold back tears. I got better as the summer went on, but every few weeks, if I would make a mistake, Mel would smile as she warned me that you can be fired for no cause and you'd have to leave immediately. It was so fantastically over the top. At one point, I pointed out that constant threats didn't create a healthy environment. Her smile only broadened. It goes both ways. You can quit at any time, you know. When the school year started in the fall, I needed to take my daughter to tour her new school for her first day. I asked to take my lunch in the afternoon so I could help my daughter. Though they approved it, when it came time for my lunch, they insisted I work through my lunch because they were being slammed. By then, Hubs had found a job with insurance, and even better, I'd been offered more hours teaching, though still not full time. It was enough. The next day, I practically floated into the bank. I waited until 10 a.m., then told Mel I needed to talk with her. She replied that she was very busy and it would have to wait until after we closed. Oh, I won't be here then, I said. She looked like I'd smacked her with a brick. What? I smiled. Remember that I needed to bring my daughter to her new school yesterday? You wouldn't let me do that? So I'm doing it this afternoon. She didn't get it at all. You can't just take an hour off when you. I had to interrupt. I'm not taking an hour off. I'm leaving. For good. At noon. You kept reminding me that I work at will. Thanks for those reminders. I'm leaving for good. In 2 hours. While Mel fumed, I waited on customers. I practically sang my greetings to them and was so dang cheerful, customers kept asking me why I was so happy. I was delighted to tell them, because I'm leaving forever at noon. After a half hour of that, Mel thought I should just go right away, and I did. I flipping skipped right out the door, then gave Mel a very elaborate curtsy at the door. What did I say last story? OP warned them. I mean, it sounds like the boss basically said, don't like it, quit. And she did. The comments were all one sided, as you might expect. Let's read a couple before our next story. Series Hybrid said, I read a quote somewhere about how you only truly get to know someone's character once they think they have enough power over you that they can do anything they want with no consequences. Mel did not fear being fired, and she took someone who was vulnerable and kept her in a constant state of fear. Why would someone do that? The real Federal said, love it. I once quit a job on the spot and had the manager say, it is customary to give 2 weeks' notice. I said, if you decided to let me go, would you have given me 2 weeks' warning? He didn't have an answer, so I walked right out. Our third story is company refuses to pay me overtime. I left job site with job incomplete and client unhappy. This happened years ago when I was just starting to wake up to companies abusing employees and employees taking it because they are just thankful to have a job. I worked as a sales rep for a company in the technology field, two-way radios and alarms to be specific. Said company never had enough technical staff, so I started training myself and asked our lead technician to teach me to program and sort out minor problems as well as do installations. Which was nice since I was doing client visits 1 to 4 times a month, depending on how big the client was, and then I could sort out problems while I was on site. I ended up doing most of my clients' installations, and the manager of the technical department was happy because it's less work for him, and he knows I do the jobs properly because I want to keep my clients happy. Accordingly, he had no problem signing my timesheets and overtime hours as well. OT was around 10 to 20 hours a month, so 2 to 5 hours a week, which I think was a great deal considering I was doing the jobs of 2 people actually. It went well for a few months until one day just before payday, I got called in by the MD/owner. He had my timesheets for the past few months in front of him. He asked me what they were, and I gave him an explanation. He scratched my OT out, saying sales reps don't get paid OT. I tried to explain to him why I was claiming overtime and that he can ask the tech manager, but he was having none of it. I was pissed as it was a little extra money, but whatever. About a week later, I was at a client about 160 kilometers or 100 miles from the office. We had a big installation and it was almost done except for programming and tidying up some cables. I checked the time and told the apprentice technician to pack up. He was like, but we are not done the job. I told him I don't care. I don't get paid overtime. It's 2 p.m. and it's still a 2-hour drive back to the office. We packed up, client comes out, and I gave him the explanation saying we will be back the following morning to finish what was effectively 30 to 45 minutes of work. Client wasn't happy, but understands that I don't get paid to work late. I was on the road about 15 minutes when my phone rings. It was the owner, same one that said I don't get paid overtime. He asked what I was doing and why I wasn't finishing the job as the client was not happy. I told him the explanation above, and then I said that he said I don't get paid overtime, so I'm not working late and will drive back to finish tomorrow. Silence for about 5 seconds as I assume he realized I was following his express instructions, and there was nothing he could do. He told me to go back and finish the job and we can talk about it later. I told him no, unless he pays me overtime. He says he will. I tell him to put it in an email before I will turn back. I could hear him go red in the face. He said he will send it now. I switched on my laptop, connected my dongle. This was still before smartphones and email on our phones. A few minutes later, the email came through. We turned around and finished the job. I got paid my overtime, and never again was there a query over my timesheets or hours booked. I was the only rep out of 5 that got paid overtime. Edit for more info. If I don't reply to your comment, nothing personal, I will try reply to as many as I can in between work. I will answer some common questions on here for clarity. This happened in South Africa. The labor board there is not very efficient, especially if it comes to smaller companies. Also, this employer had extensive government contracts and knew a lot of people personally, so even reporting him would not have helped much. And if they do investigate, it's pretty easy to get the investigation squashed with a bribe. My contract stipulated I was not entitled to overtime. I negotiated overtime with the technical manager as it would be mutually beneficial for both him and me if I did tech work as well, and ultimately the company would save money as well, so he agreed to it without objections. The overtime did not amount to much every month, as it was based on basic salary, which was low. Commission made up 3/4 of my take home pay, excluding allowances, so it wasn't much about the money, more about the principle. Other sales reps refused to do tech work as they said that was not why they were appointed. The other guys also were on the wrong side of 40 and in shape, if you can call round a shape. I was in my early 20s and wanted to get ahead, so I did extra to prove myself. The overtime that he scratched out did not get paid, at least not to his knowing. I added extra hours over the next 2 months to make up for that, so I did get paid eventually. This happened in '08, so before smartphones and voice recording, etc. My work phone was a Nokia that had no internet ability. I could call and text. Don't think it even had a camera. We connected to the internet on our laptops via dongle. It is a device that takes a SIM card, plugs into the USB port, and then connects to the cell network, almost like dial up internet. It even made a similar sound. My laptop did not even have Wi Fi. If I wanted to connect at the office, I had to plug in the LAN cable. Managing director/owner must have been charging clients for the OT, so he comes across as another middle manager who doesn't think ahead and is simply trying to make himself look good by keeping costs low. Well done, OP, even if this was some time ago. As you can imagine, there were some good stories in the comments. Heaven and Heck 80 said, the email it before I turn around and go back part was brilliant. Never forget to get it in writing. OP replied, yes, he was one of those people that would forget that they said something, so I wanted to make sure I was covered. Who replied, it's funny how they innocently forget when it is in the boss's favor, but you're not a team player when it favors the rank and file employees. The K car said, in a different field of work, I was nearly always the last to leave. Old management appreciated it. New management insisted that there was to be no more overtime. I clocked out on time, got chewed out, I reiterated company policy. I was given exception. I was later offered middle management. I noted that the position is locked weekly salary. I put the numbers on paper for another middle management person's hours worked versus hourly pay rate, and left the lower numbers on paper on the desk in plain view of not just the one middle management individual, but any staff walking by. I left the job within weeks. One by one, nearly the entire staff changed. I can't imagine why. I read these stories and I can't help but remember a few of my own along the way. And now for our final story, hearing aids do not equal earbuds. This happened a few years ago, around the time I was 17. I had just started working at a smallish cafe run by a well-known family in our area. I knew some people who had worked there before, and they told me for the most part the owners were great. Very chill and laid back when it was slow, and normally weren't bad about breathing down the employees' necks. Their eldest daughter, who also helped run everything, was the one who was very peculiar. and we'll call her Karen. I am officially diagnosed with a hearing deficiency. Not enough to be considered deaf, but more than hard of hearing, so I wear hearing aids. My first day before we opened, my coworkers asked me if they could do anything else to help me out, and we eventually started talking about the hearing aids in general. While talking about everything, I mentioned they had Bluetooth capabilities so I could play music through them. Not that I would, but I could. Karen had been in the room at the time and said, "You can't wear those, no earbud policy," and tapped on the policies paper on the wall. I protested, explaining they're hearing aids and not earbuds, and that I wouldn't be using them to listen to any music while I was working. Her reasoning was I didn't need them because I wasn't considered fully deaf, and I was doing this to get around the no earbud policy, directly quoting when I said they could play music. I can't wear them? Okay, let's see how this goes. Placed them into the case in my bag and started my shift. I couldn't understand my trainer, couldn't hear the customers, couldn't hear when orders were called to be sent out. Things were going extremely slow. A couple of warm pastries burnt since I wasn't able to hear the timers. Simple sentences had to be repeated multiple times with people basically yelling at me just for me to be able to piece a few words together. I guess the cherry on top was me ignoring one of the owners when she tried speaking to me. Karen came up to me and tried addressing me about it until she finally realized what was going on after she had repeated herself 5 times. By the end of that shift, I was allowed to wear my hearing aids. No questions asked. Can you imagine telling a deaf individual that you don't need your hearing aids and forcing them to not wear them? Yikes. That Karen manager got lucky if it didn't escalate beyond one shift and just a bit of malicious compliance by not helping customers. There was some good advice in the comments on this one. Carrie Guerin said, "That's why I never tell anyone I work with that my hearing aids have Bluetooth. Only my husband and parents know. It's like a fun secret only we know." Seaworthiness replied, "And now we all know. I promise not to tell." Mizunamo said, "Should have told customers, 'I'm sorry, I can't hear you because my trainer has forbidden me from wearing my hearing aids at work.' Let the customers complain to the manager." Buff Hagrid said, "Literally the same exact thing happened to me. I worked for a summer camp that didn't allow counselors to hang onto their phones during the week. My hearing aid's connected to my phone so I can adjust the different settings and crap, so I got permission from the camp director to keep my phone during the week. The counselor lead, however, went on a power trip and told me that I had to turn my phone in. I cited the ADA codes, but he wouldn't budge. I turned in my phone for the day, then snuck into the main office and stole it back and went to the camp director and told him what happened. The guy got fired by the end of the summer. He was pretty incompetent." If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.